The Conservative Party of Canada is facing some scrutiny after a fundraising call was leaked. In it, a party official is heard questioning the validity of the recount process. Kate McKenna joins us now with that exclusive story. Kate, this was a call between, I guess it was a Conservative fundraiser and a potential donor. What happened? Tell us about this.
So this call happened on Saturday, and it started in a super normal way. The caller, who identified herself as being from the Conservative Party of Canada, went on to thank the person on the other end of the line, he's a past donor, for giving money in the past, and then made a pitch to give more money, essentially. And it was that pitch that kind of drew disappointment and upsettedness from the donor, who we are not identifying because he doesn't want to be identified as a Conservative donor. Basically, the party caller said that they needed more money because the Liberals and the media continued to, quote, scrutinize the results of 2 recounts and attack the Conservatives, basically implying that the results of the recount were not finalized and could potentially change. We have a part of that conversation. Here's how it went.
We won the 2 major election recounts all across the country. But the media Liberals are trying to attack us and scrutinize our results. So now we have political operators on the ground.
So this was about a 2-minute call, but she raised this again and again, that more money was needed to deal with the recounts, and even went on to say, we need to stand up, we need to make sure all the votes are accurate and counted. But of course, the thing is, JP, we know that these judicial recounts are over, that winners have been declared. In this case, it's 2 Conservatives, one in a Windsor area riding and another in a riding in Newfoundland. And you know, the Liberals have conceded defeat in both of these ridings. There is no threat to these this position, these recounts changing at this time. And so the person, the potential donor, knew this and actually brought this up and said, I don't like your message. I don't like what you're saying. That's not accurate. There is no threat here. And the caller, the fundraiser, argued with him and ultimately, you know, hung up on him. And he said that he was disappointed by this because it cast doubt on the independence of the electoral process. And for that reason, he had recorded the call and he shared it with me. We did confirm the veracity of the call by dialing the number back, and it was a Conservative Party phone number. So he is sharing this because he wants to share the message that it is not okay to fundraise with the implication that perhaps there was a serious problem with the voting system. But of course, we know this is not the first time the Conservatives have done this in recent months. There was a fundraising email that went out that our colleague Kat Tunney reported on at the time, shortly after the election, saying they needed money because the suggesting that the Liberals sought to flip just enough seats to edge closer to a majority, and were trying to tip the scales in the recounts. Now, you and I know there are some actual expenses incurred during a recount. You know, that there's legal representation, there are people on the ground, that is real. But the potential donor on the other end of the line didn't know what additional costs would be incurred after a recount when there is a winner, and why the party would continue fundraising on that even after it happened. So he was also, of course, disappointed that the Conservative caller hung up on him.
Right. And what's the Conservative Party saying about this call?
Well, party spokesperson Sarah Fisher did send me a statement yesterday saying that parties are able to have people on the ground making sure that the recounts are done right and the process is fair and transparent. But she didn't answer the question that I asked, which is why the party would continue fundraising off of recounts that have already happened, where the result is clear. She did say, however, that the party is looking into this caller's conduct after I pointed out that the donor was hung up on, saying that caller etiquette in this genre of call is very important to the Conservative Party.
All right. Thank you so much. CBC's Kate McKenna. Thanks for bringing us that exclusive report tonight. I want to bring in the power panel on this story. Emily Nicolas is a columnist for Le Devoir. Françoise Boivin is a former NDP MP. And here with me in studio, Michelle Cadario is a former Liberal National Campaign Director. And Kate Harrison is a Conservative political analyst. Hey, guys. Thanks for coming in. Nice to see you all. Kate, I guess I'll start with you on this one, as you might expect. What do you make of this call? What do you make of the conduct of the fundraiser who was making some of these claims?
Yeah, I think it's right for the party to look into it. Obviously, callers should not be hung up on, and if these calls, which are often done by third-party call centers, tend to go off script, that's something that you want to look into. I do think that if there was some kind of agenda to call into question the election results. It would be odd to continue doing that in the case of elections that your party has won. So I think in this case, the simplest explanation may be correct, which is perhaps this was an old script or a dated script prior to those recounts being finalized. And it's not necessarily unusual, JP, for parties to use the prospect of a close election to raise funds. Ira Kuzmarek did just that when there was the recount debate happening in Windsor. He said, join the fight, donate here to my cause. You know, we're so close. And so it's not just necessarily a Conservative Party thing. It is, a function of this election having had so many close races, I would say that a couple of political actors are trying to use the closest of that race to try and draw funds.
Michelle, do you think it's appropriate to campaign on a judicial recount and to raise questions about whether those results are legitimate?
No, and I think that that's the actual issue here. It could very well have been an old script, as Kate said. It could very well have been something that they started to do before the actual recount happened. But the reality in the issue is what was actually the text of the script and what they were trying to call into question. It sure sounds Trumpy again, and I can't believe that the Conservatives are still kind of going down that road. And it sounds like that Mr. Pillow Talk guy who, was trying to talk about the voting machines, and that's going to be the next thing. I think that it's really important for every political person to believe in the integrity of democracy, and to try and suggest that something was untoward was happening in our judicial system, I think is just beneath the Conservatives. And I think they should just give a full-throated apology and admit their error.
And also unnecessary, as Kate points out,
unnecessary.
because they actually won those judicial recounts, right?
Exactly. Own goal.
Yeah, Francoise, I mean, one thing about our democracy, which is, a positive, is that we don't actually have in this country, unlike in the United States, widespread questioning of the electoral system, right? We don't have, it's pretty easy to cast a ballot in this country in terms of you just check one box. It's not quite like in the US where there's all these candidates and it's confusing, and it really does open it up to the potential just to raise questions about the validity of the election. We also already have ID laws in this country, so some of the things that are a hot button issue in the US aren't really the case here. But we also don't have this whole Trumpian style questioning of the election, raising doubts about whether something's legit or not. Do you see what's happened here with this call and with the fundraising email that Kate mentioned? Do you see us creeping towards some of that rhetoric that we've seen south of the border?
I do see creeping. I see a tendency that we have to stop real quick. And thank you to the anonymous caller who talked with Kate McKenna, because that brings this into light. And it's because a party knows that there are some people who believe that. We all, on social media, see some of those exact same type of argument that the person who was doing the fundraising for the Conservative used. So it's a dangerous path, and it gives kind of credence. This time it didn't work with that person that she was calling, but it could have worked with other people, and that it worked at some point in time, albeit because it's the words that were used. When you use the words, and I'm not a liberal, but when you use the words, the liberals and the liberal media are going to scrutinize, you're insinuating things that aren't true. What I find totally refreshing is that the person, the potential donor, called a liberal media to denounce it, an ex-donor to the Conservative. I think this person was not well briefed, the person who was calling on behalf of the Conservative. Maybe she was working on an old scenario, but the moment that you see some resistance, you should teach them, back off, use something else, because you're losing the person. At the end, it was clear from the interview that I could read from Kate that person was arguing every sentence that person was making. But it gives credence by a political party, and that just for that reason, I find this a bit appalling. And that's coming from me, the queen of hating to fundraise when I was an MP. Just hated it. So I respect those who do it constantly on behalf of parties, but please don't use things like that. It really denature the whole process.
Emily, I mean, to Kate's point, I mean, this was like a call center operator, we think. It wasn't like Pierre Poilievre himself. It wasn't Andrew Scheer, the parliamentary leader. It wasn't someone senior in the party kind of standing in front of the cameras and raising major doubts about the election. In fact, Pierre Poilievre conceded the election on election night and was, didn't put up much of a stink about it. We haven't seen high-level officials doing this sort of thing. It's party people, really. Does that make it better?
It doesn't make it better. It does not make it worse, in the sense that it makes it better politically for the Conservative Party to essentially say this was a mistake. This may be an old script. This person will be disciplined or terminated or whatever it is, and just move on from it. And so I don't expect it to be that specific incident to become too much of a hot potato for the party, in the sense that it's an easy one to dissociate yourself from. At the same time, just the fact that we're having this conversation, I think is good for the country, in the sense that you now know if people thought that this sort of script was normal or acceptable, and just the ways in which things are done. And I take Kate's words for actions that the Liberals could have done the same in some other races as well. I think that just the fact that we're having this conversation, that this was brought to light as a practice by the other Kate McKenna, that makes it less of a payday politically to be doing this. You don't want to have your fundraising tactics to be necessarily on the front page of the CBC and other newspapers. That isn't necessarily a good political calculation, if that's what we're talking about today, and that becomes even eventually question period. And so that cools the practice in and of itself more than any concrete disciplinary measure that the party may or may not do as a result of this.